So it's recording now. Okay, so again, the idea of the ALS directors meeting, and I had to actually change it to a Friday, and I know sometimes that's inconvenient for people. Uh, I'm just looking at my email. Um, so, and the reason I had to change it was because I think the assessment directors, there were a lot of meetings on Thursdays for some strange reason. And so it just seemed more logical um, to create a different space, even though sometimes, people have birthdays and they have celebrations and then they have weekend plans. So that actually happened with Michelle Eldridge. Happy birthday, Provo people. And also Beverly from Canyons. So they had birthday celebrations, and they let me know. But because we're recording it, I think it'll make a difference. When I send the link out, I'm also going to add additional resources for all of you. Um, so I see Ruth Ann from Uinta. Uinta is a great place, and Brittany from Salt Lake Center for Science Education. I haven't seen you. You realize all the fun we had when we did design thinking? Yeah, well, we'll have to get Shelley Goldman back from Stanford and do that. We can like expand it for all kinds of teams throughout the state, which would really be fun. Let's see. Okay, so the overview is going to be Megan's going to talk a little bit briefly about WIDA. Um, and then Kim Fratto, she's going to talk about some issues that have come up with identifying students and the whole issue of over identifying and then under identifying and then people being afraid to do anything. Okay, so the question is you can't really be afraid to do anything that supports students having, dual services because, that's just kind of federal law as well as common sense for students and their families, and especially families that come from other countries. It's important to really, and Kim will go over that. Michelle is going to give us a little background of her experience and how she prepared Jordan District for the monitoring visit and how we're actually changing the monitoring visits to build the capacity at the local schools. And then Chris Westerfield and their team. Robin couldn't be with us, but when I send out the email, you'll see that she was a panelist with Michelle Eldridge, Michelle Loveday, and Ellie Gallagher on the Governor's Forum for Economic Development, um, that I was lucky enough to do some presentation of the great work that you're all doing. And then we'll actually have Veronica. She has finished the interpreter certification, as well as Tani from Provo, and they'll tell a little bit about their experiences upscaling the work for interpreters, which is an implementation of HB 302. And then Ellie from Wasatch, and the issue ends up going back to this idea of students learning English who end up meeting their annual growth goals if they're in a DLI Spanish class, which, ends up being fairly logical, but sometimes people have a difficulty understanding the research related to that, which is, if you're literate in your first language, then, obviously you're going to learn other languages much faster. So the whole thing about, opportunity gaps and how we can learn from each other and see really great instruction. Especially there's always a challenge at the high school, and there's some like great things happening in high schools and some great science classes. Um, one of the best science classes I've ever seen is in biology um, at Hillcrest Junior High in Murray. And just lots of other great opportunities to really learn, with and from each other. and other places that are doing amazing work on supporting indigenous languages, like Stephanie Rowley from Tooele and the Goshute language. And we have a lot to be proud of in Utah in focusing on Southern Paiute, which Washington County is focusing on, Goshute, and of course, Navajo and San Juan, and also their support for the Ute tribe. Okay, so we're going to actually start with Megan, and I'll check the chat if you have questions. And Megan is really open. You know her from WIDA and assessment to any kind of question. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself, say who you are, and, ask the question.
Yep,
Hi, Jeff. How are
absolutely.
you?
Okay, I'm gonna start to share. And is this sharing the correct screen for you all?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. And as Christelle said, please just do jump in and let me know if you have any questions. You're welcome to come off of mute at any time. Are you seeing the actual presentation, or are you seeing my presentation mode?
No, well, actually, it says WIDA assessing English language proficiency, and it has your name and Tracy's.
Yep.
So I think it's the slides.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm Megan Lopez. Thank you so much for joining today. And so a couple of changes, if you were not aware, is that Anne Michelle Neal, who used to work with me on WIDA, she left the agency to go back to her psychology roots. So she is back practicing school psychology again. And Tracy Gooley and I are doing WIDA together. I'll be your main point of contact for anything and everything WIDA. Tracy Gooley is really going to be for the alternate side. So anything dealing with accommodations, our students that are duly identified and students that are taking alternate. So just be aware. And if you're not sure who to reach out to, we'll help you get in touch with the right person. So I will share these slides with you after. I just can't share them while I'm actually presenting them. So just as a reminder, we are in our access, already preparing for access testing. We are there. And just remember that the test window, it opens on January 7th. It is 2 months long. We want you to use the full test window. Other state tests, you normally have to choose a 6-week window. That is not the case with WIDA Access. Please use the full window because it is directly tied to your student civil rights, and providing ample opportunity is definitely key here. If you wait the last 2 weeks to start testing your students, really stop and ask yourself, are you giving those students the ample opportunity to test and participate in that, right? So we will really strongly encourage you, start right at the beginning. So students that might be chronically absent, or knowing that it's winter, and so illness definitely is a factor that we have to consider. Are we making sure that students have every opportunity to test? Remember last year we made a change that we now do 2 pre-ID uploads. The first one is going to take place on October 30th, so next week. So what that means is we do need you to have your SIS updated as much as possible next week by the 29th. And remember that if new students come, it's okay. But it does make it easier because we do all the materials ordering based on this first pre-ID upload. And when we say we do the material ordering for you, that is for kindergarten access and access online, grades 1 through 12. So right now, the window for ordering alternate access in Braille or even large print, that window is open. It is open through Monday. So if you need those materials, you can order those. Otherwise, everything else we order. There's been a little confusion about paper access. If a student needs to take paper access because maybe they have no technology experience, that would be an appropriate use of paper, but they cannot do hybrid. They can't do some online and some paper. It has to be all or nothing. And so we order any of the paper materials that are needed for access online, 1 through 12. But if a student needs all paper, then you would need to order that as well. And so again, here we are with those official dates. And if you miss something, don't panic because there's always other opportunities to order more materials. On the 11th of December is when we will do the second pre-ID upload. So any students that you identify after the 30th through November, partway through December, we will again capture and upload. If any of those students need materials, you would need to order those materials starting the 13th of December for them. But just remember that when you get your materials, there's always extra materials. So if you get just a couple of new students, you probably won't need to order anything anyways. But if you get a large influx of new students, that window to order additional materials will open on December 13th. One thing that ALS directors and assessment directors asked for was please change the shipping. It's always been problematic. And so we were able to work out with DRC and UPS to have test materials received earlier. So those materials will be delivered on December 13th or so that Friday or Monday, December 16th. UPS will not try to do it over the weekend. So nobody go to the school over the weekend. They won't do it. So either Friday or Monday, and you do need someone to sign for it. Please make sure that it's, people know that it's coming because we have had instances where employees refused to sign for something because they didn't know what it was and it got shipped all back. So again, be there to receive those materials. And then the window, again, 2 whole months, please use it. And you should be receiving reports come May. So if you have any questions, please just email me, reach out, and no apologies. Veronica, I'm looking at you. Chronic apologizer, but I love hearing from you all. Okay, this is a question we've gotten a lot. We have the new alternate access. You guys got your reports this fall for those new alternate access, for the new alternate access reports. And they are on no longer the A and the P levels, right? They are just a 1 through 5 and they are whole numbers. Please do note Utah still, per our consolidated state plan, otherwise known as our ESSA plan, we do not have an alternate exit criteria. Alternate access is a different test than the regular access for ELLs. Okay, so the exit criteria that we have established for students taking the regular online access does not work for our alternate access. So right now, those students cannot be exited still. We are diligently working on establishing that exit criteria. The work began this summer, so they cannot be exited until we establish what that exit criteria is going to be, and then it needs to be approved by US Ed. Once that is done, we will communicate it very loudly and aggressively to the entire field. There are, right now, the alternate PLDs are there. So you can look at the PLDs. What do these scores mean for these students taking alternate access? And then on this screen, it says alternate can-do descriptors coming soon. I didn't have time to update this, but they were just released 48 hours ago. So those are online and available, the alternate can-do descriptors again, to help inform instruction with these students. When I'm done, I will drop the link to those alternate can-do descriptors in the chat along with the PowerPoint. So again, we are not exiting students taking alternate yet until we have an official approved exit criteria. So with that, I wanted to give you an update on where we're at with that. We have met with our, we've been working with WIDA, and we met with our TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee, and we met with APAC. Okay, APAC is our assessment and accountability policy advisory committee, and that's per board rule. And the recommendation for moving forward with our alternate exit criteria, just so you know where we're at, is potentially a banded approach, where, there will be this score is going to be an automatic exit, but if a student scores within this range, it's going to include some LEA authority, and the IEP and language teams get to start to determine it. So APAC has made an official recommendation that LEAs be a really part of the decision-making process of whether or not to exit students. You guys know these students the best, and so your knowledge of where they're at with their language development and also their severe cognitive disability really is going to play a role in determining if we should exit these students or not. Again, we are working with all stakeholders. Tracy's meeting with all the special ed directors. I'll be meeting with you. We are working again with our TAC. You will start to probably see surveys coming your way to inform this process. And that's part of the federal requirement to make sure that we have ample stakeholder feedback in what we eventually establish, and then submit to USED. So stay tuned. We can't exit students quite yet, but as soon as we do, we suspect that our hope is this spring to start exiting, but we're at the mercy of USED for approval. So stay tuned. We'll be communicating a lot more. I also wanted to give you a quick update on accountability. So APAC, again, also has been working on, and we met and discussed the accountability technical manual. Megan got her hands on it this fall, and we started getting a lot of great questions from some of you right here in the meeting about, hey, what about these situations where it's not actually described or we don't see any business rules for this in the accountability manual when it comes to our EL growth targets. So one thing that APAC did determine, they unanimously supported and voted on, was we have in the accountability manual, we have students, we have those growth tables, and we have their baseline year. Reality is we have students that in their very first year of identification in Utah, for some reason or another, they don't take access in their first year. Maybe they take only part of it, so they don't get an entire overall score, or maybe for some reason they couldn't take it, absence, illness. We don't have a score for their first year. And so APAC unanimously decided that the new business rule, and this will be amended in the accountability manual, is that their first access test that they take will become their baseline score. So on those tables, it'll be that baseline score, but they will still stay in the proper year. So if the student takes it their second year of being an EL, they would just jump to that second column, right? Still in that initial baseline, right, score, that row, but they would just move and their growth would just start in that second year, second column. So that's where growth will start to be determined if they didn't take it. So we've noticed that that's one issue. We are working on other issues that have been identified in the accountability manual, and we will keep you updated as we work with our state's TAC and APAC to resolve them. Again, if you have any questions, the more you communicate with us and reach out to us, the better. And this is definitely this is joint, many departments at USBE working on it. We have our data and statistics. We have our assessment and accountability team. We have the Center for Continuous School Improvement. We are all working on it together. So, and we're really aiming to make sure that we have everything spelled out so everyone has the business rules in front of them and they understand how is accountability going to be calculated, especially in these unique situations. So again, stay tuned as we continue to work out all the other bugs. All right. Trainings. We do have trainings that are happening for this year. They are all posted in Midas, except for those self-paced workshops that are available through the secure portal. Please remember that either assessment directors or you all are charged with creating accounts for your educators. Any educator in Utah can have a WIDA secure portal account and access all of these self-paced online workshops. So please make sure that they're doing it. And then we do have our partnered workshops that WIDA will be conducting coming up very, very soon. Some of these registration is closing pretty soon, next week, as a matter of fact. And so I'm not sure why I have a thumbs up, but I do. But here are our courses, and you can link to these from the slides once I drop them in the chat. Please attend if you can. There is limited space though. And I think that is actually it. Here's our contact. I would say email first and foremost, as it's hard to get to answering the phone when we're presenting in meetings. So quick and easy updates. Again, please stay tuned with the exit criteria, and Christelle and I will be sending out emails to participate in surveys and everything like that as we continue this alternate exit criteria. So that is it. And I see no questions in the chat and no one came off of mute. So I like that. That was easy.
Thanks, Megan. And
Yeah.
I'm just going to make a couple of points, and then I'll introduce Kim Fratto. You know, the WIDA access and the home language survey, we can't have, registrars or teachers deciding that students are English learners. Okay, that happens. Okay, so
Mhm.
I'm just giving you a heads up in relationship to the way you work with your registrars and teachers and administrators in relationship to, you know, who actually has access. And the purpose of monitoring, of using WIDA assessment data to better inform instruction in the content for all teachers. It's not an ELD issue. It's not an ESL issue. The other thing, when students don't understand the implications of taking WIDA, why would they be invested in taking it? They also don't really understand that in some places, a WIDA score means that counselors will not provide access to them for advanced coursework, which is a civil rights violation. And
Mhm.
that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
So the whole point of better understanding the opportunity that WIDA presents for students and families is really important, as well as who is actually eligible. I mean, I can't even tell you, and Megan can probably tell you, I'm not sure we keep track of all the people who end up getting students and they were marked as EL.
Uh-huh.
They weren't EL ever, but somehow they got marked. And
Uh-huh.
so that ends up being like a really serious problem. So it's up to us to mitigate that kind of what I don't even know what it is. Is it quick to judgment or, I don't really know, but I think the more we communicate with each other and the more we address the opportunities of the WIDA access to ensure that students have, uh, total access to DLI programs, to advanced coursework. I mean, all you have to do is look at the report card for high schools, and I'm a high school teacher. I've always been, middle school and elementary. And you see the gap, the opportunity gap in the SOAR report for counselors when you see students learning English don't have access. It's a huge opportunity gap, and that's on us, right? So the more we advocate for students in the way in which counselors and registrars and administrators understand the importance of WIDA, especially the students, then we won't have families being so distressed when when students are misidentified.
Mhm.
So any comments or questions before we go to Kim Fratto?
Christelle, I actually just remembered you speaking about duly identified opportunities. It just reminded me. And this is the other hat, my secondary ELA assessment hat that I want to put on for a second. One big change with Utah Aspire Plus is that we had to retire the English subtest. So it is only reading, science, and math now. The English subtest of Utah Aspire Plus has been retired. I know a bunch of LEAs use the English subtest for the seal of biliteracy. And now that's not going to be an option since it's not going to be tested. So I just wanted to let you know we are aware of that. And I am meeting with Carl Bowman actually today to discuss what are other options if your LEA does use the English subtest on the application for the seal of biliteracy for students. So do note that we'll be working that out and we're meeting to address that. So, and if you haven't heard that that's one of the changes, it is we don't have any more language standards in our revised ELA standards. It was mainly, they were put in mainly the writing standards, but we can't assess writing. So, unfortunately. So, stay tuned. Carl and I will have more updates on the seal of biliteracy when it comes to that subtest being retired.
Yeah, so I'll just add an additional point. When students take I'm just checking because Kim is having difficulty logging on. So we might go to somebody else until I get her logged on. Um, so, or Megan, can you send Kim a link?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when students get the biliteracy seal, and it shouldn't be just the senior year. When students become proficient in WIDA, then, and they have multiple languages, it would be important to look at the policy and the procedures to ensure that students have access to attaining a biliteracy seal. And the reason I say that is that when students have the biliteracy seal and they go to a university, that takes the place of any foreign language requirement. So it's an advantage. If you have eighth graders or ninth graders, 10th graders, it shouldn't be this whole thing about, well, it's only seniors. Okay, so there's nothing in the rule that says anything about it's just seniors. There's nothing there. The other thing is that we're working on goes back to what Ellie Gallagher will talk about is, and Megan mentioned, is this whole idea about, annual growth goals. Annual growth goals means that if you're in a DLI Spanish program and and you actually have access as a student learning English to DLI Spanish, then you're actually going to acquire the English growth goals, the annual growth goals in the accountability system faster. It's something like all those students in DLI Spanish, and I won't say anymore because Ellie's going to talk about this. Um, it's like 67, 70% of those English learners end up meeting their annual growth goals and test out a WIDA. Those who are not in DLI, the percentage throughout the state is much lower, like maybe 40%. So, I mean, we're all making a plug for, really emphasizing and working with assets of families and students instead of thinking it's a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Megan, thank you. And thanks for sending Kim the link. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And thank you all for having me. And again, email me anytime. I'm going to jump off. But if I need to jump back on, I'm happy to. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Thanks, Megan.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Okay, so welcome, Kim. Um,
Morning.
Kim is one of my long trusted allies at USBE, and so we've done all kinds of amazing work, especially with interpreters, um, which people later on will talk about. There's a new application on the Title III website for getting interpreters registered, and the application there for earning a USBE certification for interpreter. It's a 10-week course with 8 Zoom sessions that I've designed based on the national standards and HB 302. And as a consequence, we have, which, we had a drum roll and all this kind of stuff. We have 52 certified USBE interpreters, throughout the state. And the goal, when we talk to Veronica and Provo, will actually be how we upscale that and disseminate those opportunities at no cost. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Kim. She'll kind of explain, the major issue that we're seeing, and it goes back to communication in an effective way, so that you get the technical assistance that you need. Okay, Kim.
Hi. Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kim Fratto, and I'm the Director of Special Education Programs. And I work here at USBE. One of the programs that I help to oversee, and I work closely with Christelle on, is multilanguage learners with disabilities. And so one of the things that I do is I answered lots of questions about students with disabilities and multilanguage learners, and what is appropriate and what is allowed under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. What like when can you refer, frequently asked questions, things like that. So last year I came into one of these meetings and I presented a slide deck that I also presented to our special education directors. And I have updated the slide deck. It's a lot of the same information, but I'm going to make that available to you again because it's got a lot of informational stuff on there. And I think I'll share my screen and kind of go through some things, because one of the things that I added to is we get Christelle and I keep track of like questions that we get from the field. And so I have a frequently asked questions slide. And one of the questions that we keep getting is, when can I refer a student that's a multilanguage learner and for special education services? And some of the things that we're hearing from the field is that they have to be in the country for a certain amount of time. And for students who may have a disability, whether it's the school that suspects it, whether it's the parents that suspect it, whether it's a family member that's brought it to the attention of the parents, it's a doctor or pediatrician or somebody, if that information comes then to the school and someone is suspecting disability, that invokes what's called child find under IDEA. And that means you must investigate whether that child has a disability. You cannot tell a parent or an advocate or a teacher or somebody that, oh, no, we can't test this child or this student because they have not been in the country long enough, or they haven't been exposed to English for a long enough time. You have to test them and you have to investigate in their language, if need be, if it's a disability. Is it a language difference or is it a disability? Now, one of the things that IDEA also requires is that you have within your policies and procedures ways to tease that out. Are we talking about disability or language difference? Because we don't want to overqualify students and refer all students who speak another language and they're struggling to speak that language or they haven't acquired it. But there are things to look for in students who have not mastered the English language to be able to determine if they're a student with a disability or if they're experiencing issues because of language. So I am going, go ahead, Krista.
Yeah, also, I'll actually share the slide deck as well. So you'll see it here, but when she gives me the link and I send out the recording, then you'll have everything that you need.
Okay, I think I'm in the wrong share. So let me just share one more time. Sometimes my screen takes a second to decide if it's going to. Can you see slides?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let me go and just tell you what this covers. Let me put it in presentation mode for you. Okay, common terms that we use: English language learner, ELL, English learner, EL. These are common terms that you'll hear. Multi-language learner, native language, home language, first language, L1, limited English proficient. And you guys are all familiar with these terms. But the reason I put these in here is because sometimes you'll be working with special education directors or special education staff, and they might not be familiar with all of the terms. What native language means under our rules, and the CFR is, when I refer to the CFR, I'm referring to the Code of Federal Regulations, what the IDEA says. And this is what native language means in our rules, our USBE special education rules, and the Code of Federal Language. So the language normally used by that individual, used by the parents of the students in all direct contact with the student, including evaluation of the student. The language normally used by the student in the home or learning environment. And for an individual with deafness or blindness, or an individual with no written language, the mode of communication that's normally used by the individual: sign, braille.
Kim, we have a question which is related to this. It's, what is the correct way to test the student in their native language to see if there's a learning disability? So it's connected to this, but I think people might be confused.
Yes, so that's a very good question. We get that a lot. So the rules say, the special education rules and Code of Federal Regulations say that you have to test the student in their native language when unless it's not feasible to do so. And so I have a slide for that that's towards the end. It talks about what the standard for what not feasible means, and it's a pretty high standard. So that means you have to test that student in, and it also says you have to test them in the language or mode of communication that is going to yield you the most accurate results about what they are able to do academically. So these are where teams come together and have discussions about this, because it's not a one size fits all for every student. So it's a very good question. It's kind of a loaded question, and it's a that depends. And I know everyone hates a that depends type of question, but unfortunately it is. So if the student only speaks, we'll say Spanish, because that's one of the most common language, or I say Portuguese a lot because my daughters-in-law speak Portuguese, and that's the language I'm trying to learn. And it's hard to learn a language. I know firsthand. So if that's one of those languages is their first language and they don't speak any other language, then you're going to need to test them in that language. Now, because it wouldn't be, nothing accurate would come of testing them in English. You're not going to be able to figure out what they know and can do or understand you. So you're going to need to be able to test them in that language. And if they and then you also have to take into consideration if they speak another language at home, say Spanish is the language that's spoken at home, but they've been in school since, preschool or kindergarten or for however many years, and all their academics is in English, then to test them in Spanish academics is not going to yield you the most accurate results. So you have to look at both of those types of factors and determine as a team which one is going to yield the most accurate results. And there are some tests that you can use, and you can use a translator to help with tests. There's other tests that you cannot, because then they haven't been the test hasn't been validated in that way and normed in that way. And so if you use a translator to test, it would invalidate the test. So there are different types of testing that you can use to determine where students are functioning academically, and they're not all standardized tests. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to think outside the window. It's not all, okay, well, if I can't do the Woodcock-Johnson 4, then I can't test this student to see if they have and rule out a disability. And that's not true. There's other things you can use. You can use formative, summative, progress monitoring, different informal measures. There's lots of ways to test a student. Did that help? Okay. All right. So these are common questions. When can I refer a multilanguage learner to special education? If you suspect disability, if someone suspects disability, it invokes child find. So you must refer. You cannot put a time limit on it and say they haven't been in the country enough, but you must also have processes in place to rule out, is this a disability or is this a language difference? Now that's a much different issue than saying, no, they haven't been here long enough because we don't think it's a disability. We think it's a language difference. Okay, we don't deal in hypotheticals. All right, and then the next one, what score does a student need to receive on WIDA to rule out special education referral? This is also not a thing. There's no score that a student has to receive before they can go to before they can be referred. Okay, remember, special education is an entitlement services, and if students qualify, they must get the service. What language proficiency level is needed for advanced coursework or honors classes? Also not a thing. We cannot say you have to score this level or that level, or you can't be referred. This is, or you cannot take these courses, excuse me. This is something that's been really problematic for students who are learning multi-languages, because they are not given opportunities, educational opportunities that some of our other students get because of the presumption or false assumption that they're not going to be able to keep up with the content because they don't speak the language well enough. So be careful there. How long must a student be in the country before they can be referred? We've talked about that. Not a thing. Doesn't matter how long. If they suspect disability, you got to look into it. Okay. How likely is it that all multilanguage learners have a disability? I get that question a lot. It's just as likely as a student who isn't a multilanguage learner. Disabilities don't occur at a higher rate in students who are learning or who speak a different language. They don't occur in a higher rate, at a higher rate. It's the same likelihood. And I'll just tell you that nationally, the amount of the percentage of students with disabilities in public schools is around 12.5%, and Utah is right there with that, in line with national averages. So we wouldn't expect them to occur at a higher rate. And one of the things we do look at when we go out and monitor is we look at the prevalence rate in LEAs. So if you have a prevalence rate of 17% of your students who are multilanguage learners and they have disabilities, we're going to say, wait a minute, we want you to look at this a little bit closer, and we're going to look at that because it shouldn't occur at a higher rate than other students. So if the prevalence rate is higher, we're going to say, maybe we should look into this. Okay, is an assessment in the student's first language necessary? It may be, as we've discussed. We've already discussed that questions. What are the concerns about misidentifying students with a disability? So, those are pretty big concerns. That's why we say you must have written into your policies and procedures ways to determine, is this a disability or is this a language difference, right? Because we have what I call the 4Ds, and I use this, and a friend of mine from Texas, Dr. Schultz, he uses this a lot, and he's added one more, but I say, is it a difference? Is it a disability? Is it a delay, right? Because sometimes students have developmental delays. Is it difficult? Because sometimes things are just harder for some students than others, and they have to buckle down and have some grit and perseverance. And then he's added, or is it just disinterested? Because some students are not interested in it. We haven't made it the topic relevant to them, right? So, but we have to be able to tease those out. Do students need both special education and English language development services? Absolutely, and it's the law. It's required. If they qualify, they have to have both. Both are entitlement services. One does not override the other. One is not more important than the other. And if you think about it fundamentally, you cannot access education if communication is getting in the way, right? So if you cannot communicate in the language that the education is being presented in, and someone's not helping you with that, with English language development, then it's going to impact your education. Is it appropriate to write an IEP goal for the student to learn English? Not really. So let me explain this. This is where it gets kind of confusing. This is kind of a yes and no. So you have to be careful with this one. You can write an IEP goal that talks about in their present levels of academic and functional performance that the student is learning English, and because they're learning English, it in combination with their disability, it's impacting their ability to access. And so what you're going to do with IEP goals is you're going to make sure that they get their English language development services as well. But learning English is not a disability. Learning another language is not a disability. Being bilingual is not a disability. So writing IEP goals for students to master puts learning English in the position of saying, oh, they have to learn English because it's a disability for the child not to learn English. And that is not appropriate. So you have to be careful there. Are we required to serve students in post-high school programs? Yes, absolutely. We are required to serve students in post-high school programs. The IDEA says students are entitled to services through age 22. So if they're in a post-high school program and they're a multilanguage learner, they must have services. And that's when we get a lot, because it's like, oh, well, they've graduated or they've moved on and they're into their post-high school program. So it's not something that we do with our English language development programs anymore. We don't serve them. And so we're getting a lot of questions about that. That is problematic. It's a requirement. They must have access to the services. Not having access to those services is a denial of FAPE, a free, appropriate public education. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so what I have here is all the backup slides for all those questions that we went over. And I put them here because I think it's sometimes very helpful for, it is for me and for people that, like, when you're talking and trying to explain something, it's like, well, this is where it is and this is why it's this way. So this is Child Find. These are the components of Child Find. This also came out to restate it in a Dear Colleague letter, January 7th of 2015. I love our dear colleague letters from Office of Special Ed Programs. I say that is when they come out and say, okay, this is in the law, but for some reason people aren't understanding what's written in the law. So in case you don't get it, this is what we said in the law. This is what we mean. We said what we mean what we say. Here it is in the letter. Okay, meaningful communication. This is important with parents. Communication to parents must be clear and in the language they understand. So, excuse me, one of the things we got to be careful with here is if an advocate or an interpreter or somebody comes in on behalf of a parent and says, this parent is expressing to me this about their child and they're concerned, we need to take that seriously, because if the parent can't communicate in English to you and they're trying to do that through an advocate or an interpreter or a parent liaison, we can't then say to that liaison or advocate or interpreter, well, the parent has to communicate that to us, or they have to ask us themselves. We have heard this. We can't have that. If they can't communicate clear to you and they have somebody assisting with that and they're coming in and they have concerns about their children, you have to take that as they're asking for that help, and it invokes Child Find.
So, Kim, let me also say, you realize that this is almost a verbatim from the Department of Justice letter. That's a civil rights violation. That's why Dan Johnson in 2022 developed HB 302 as state law. So we not only have violations in IDEA, but in civil rights law, federal law, and now in state law. So, so Kim and I hear these things all the time. I mean, we're not saying that this is infrequent. I mean, this is frequent. This is a frequent issue. And
Yeah.
so the biggest thing is we're trying to provide the kind of technical assistance that will not only do the best for our children and our families, but keep you safe from violating state and federal law, right? If you don't know these things and you say, this is what I've heard, well, we always do it this way. Okay, so no, no, that you can't say that anymore because this is not a justification for violating federal OCR and now state law. Families need meaningful communication, and there are some districts that are stellar in doing this, right? And this is a state obligation. So I'll stop now because, I'm hoping that when Michelle Loveday gets on, she'll talk about her family fair and the work that they do with engaging families, and this is a good thing because students do better when their parents are engaged in the actual process and they care about their children, but they have to actually know in a meaningful language that they can understand. So sorry, Kim, but this is like
No.
a hot
No,
point.
it is. And I just will add that one of the main purposes of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, is parent involvement. That's a critical aspect, and parental involvement and parent rights. And if you don't communicate with them clearly in a language they understand, you're violating that part of IDEA. And we have now been, this is a new thing under OSEP, and we have lots of acronyms, I know, but OSEP is the Office of Special Education Programs, which is under the U.S. Department of Education. And when things are brought to our attention at the USBE, and it's things that are not in line with the law, and that could violate a student's right to a free, appropriate public education, it is considered a credible allegation, and we must look into it. So when people call and say, hey, I have this, we must look into it. And then when people call me, I, always try to get to the root of it. Like, well, have you talked with the school? Have you talked with the director? Have you talked with, we don't go right to, oh, just file a complaint. We always go back into, well, let's see if there's a miscommunication here. Is there a misunderstanding? Have you talked about this? And have you, do you have an advocate or do you have an interpreter? Or are you making sure you understand things correctly? And so we really try to help them understand what like the rules say. And sometimes especially when you're dealing with different languages, there can be miscommunication and such. But then I also have to say, I am required to say, these are the remedies available to you. You can file a hotline complaint with USBE. You can file that anonymously, or you can leave your information. You can file a state complaint with our office, and you can go through due process, and you can also file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights. I am required to tell them what options they have. So we always start with, is it communication? Is it this? But I'm required to tell them that. I always try to make sure I explain to them. It's usually most of the time I tell them, I say this verbatim, it's in the best interest. 99% of the time, it's in the best interest if you can resolve this at the school level. It's better for kids, right? Because I always say when elephants fight, we're the elephants, the grass gets trampled, that's the students. So it's better if we can resolve it and communicate at the school level. And I always say that. And I tell parents 99.9% of the time, that's better. But if you can't, these are your remedies, and I'm obligated to let them know. So I just think that that's important that you all know, because it's not like we're telling people when they call, oh, you must do this and you must file this complaint or you do that. We always try to get them to resolve it and see if there's a communication issue, but we are required to let them know what their remedies are. Okay, so can parents opt out? if they can opt out of disability related services, but it doesn't mean that the LEA or the SEA is not obligated to provide appropriate language assistance services to students. So here's some information where you go in the toolkit. I'm sure you guys are well versed in opt out, so we won't spend a lot of time there. Federal state policies about opt out are here. Again, this is the same presentation I give to our special ed directors. We want everyone on the same page. And so this is good for you to have, because then you can refer to this and then they have that information, and then you can make sure you're all understanding. Determination of eligibility. A student must not be determined to be a student with a disability if the determinant factor is limited English proficiency. We've talked about that. Learning a language is not a disability. Students, we've talked about that in being provided in their native language. And here's the rule that backs up that we've talked about. I don't want to spend a lot of time on these things that we've already discussed, because I know your time is precious this morning. So the this is where the feasibility and the threshold comes in. LEAs must, as a threshold matter, assess the student's proficiency in both English and their native language in order to determine which language the eligibility evaluation should be conducted in. Additionally, Title V of the Civil Rights, 6 of the Civil Rights Act requires districts to provide equal educational opportunity to national origin minority students. Again, that's in the Code of Federal Regulations. So we talked about that, but there's where it comes from. You can cite it. So unless it is clearly not feasible is a high standard. Remember, there are hundreds and hundreds of languages listed for interpretation and translation services through various contractors. You need to work with your LEA and have a plan before. You got to get this in line now. Before you're asked, you have to have a plan for purchase and work with your purchasing department for translation services before you need them. We get all the time people come to us and say, oh, we have this right now and I need a translator right now. And I'm like, well, I don't have like translators to just send out to you. That's something that as an LEA, you're responsible to have in place or have a process in place. So you need to do that before you need it, because when you need it in real time, it's too late. Every district's required to have a language access policy. Here's some more links. You guys are well versed in all of this. Access parent letter, you know about that. It's available in the 47 languages. Here's a sample. Again, for WIDA, understanding your child's score, alternate access, very important for students with disabilities. These are what is access for ELLs. These are really good resources that parents should also be aware of, because they come in their different languages and they can access. So that's super important. And then this is one that I've been asked of lately, because this is not required, but how do you know if it's a disability for a student that's like in preschool? What do we do? And so again, these are IEP team decisions, but here's the link to WIDA Early Learning Development Standards. Very helpful for LEAs to have, even though we don't require WIDA in preschool. And then available resources. Again, our website, USB website's very robust. Here's some links that you guys are probably well versed in. And then accessibility and accommodations manual. We have that. That is super important. Here's some very good pages. The accommodations start on page 14. Specific circumstances is one you'll want to look at on page 25. All access and decision tree 26, I think, is very helpful. And then domain exception tree is on page 29. And that's for if you have students with co-occurring disabilities, maybe they're have a learning disability, or they're intellectually disabled and they're deaf, or they can't, or they're deaf blind, they can't write, they can't see, they have to have a mode of communication, and you're trying to figure out how to assess them. And then questions about accountability is, you can talk with Tracy Gooley, and she does our assessment accountability. And then of course, this was, Dr. Christelle Strada, but this was again, one that went to our special ed directors, and I wanted to make sure that they knew other people other than me. And then I'm available. Contact me. And I will give this to Christelle so she can share it with you. Questions for me
So if you have questions, make sure you just unmute and ask the questions. The other thing is on the Title III page where it says legislation, it actually has the model access, language access policy. This is a state law, it's required. Interpreters tell me that many administrators have no idea what a language access policy is. Okay, now this was passed in 2022, and on the Title III webpage where it says legislation, there's the model policy, and it has to be passed by your board, right? You just can't, in your annual self-assessment, you can't just put a link, or you can just say, we're working on it, okay? Or we have it in policy, but it's not board approved. Okay, so that's one thing. I mean, the other thing, which is really important as well, is that we're here to help you, right? So we're resources for you. You don't need to feel embarrassed or upset or anything like that in relationship to the questions you have, especially with the turnover at districts. You have Kim and I and Megan who've been here for quite a while. And so, use this as a resource and, open up to the conversation of, how can you help us get this done? I mean, that's really the point. Any other questions? Now, remember, all of these things are going to go out to you, which is really kind of the key issue about, how is it? So we have this whole thing about Utah family values. Okay, we have to ask ourselves, like, which families have, the kind of opportunities that native English speakers have. I mean, that's really the point. That's one of the hallmarks of being a democratic society. And so if we want to really emphasize that, then, it's all about learning from each other and working together. Kim, thank you so much. And when you send me, I'll send this out to everybody.
Can I ask a question for before Kim goes?
Oh, yes, anybody can ask a question. Great.
Thank you. We have different programs for our special education students who go up to the age 22. So we have a couple of different programs. I wondered if anyone would share, like in the chat, how they are addressing that MLL part or that English language development part of their different programs that they have for those students.
And
Can I
Rhonda's
ask-
from Ogden. Rhonda's from Ogden.
Okay,
So
can I just ask a clarifying question, Rhonda? So when you say different programs, do you for students, you mean like a special school or like they go?
So so those who are severely disabled will stay in kind of a unit by themselves up until they're 22. We have others who go out on a kind of a work kind of program where they're just, so those are students who might be I don't know that you would call them mild moderate, but that still are in our program, but post high school programs. But they're doing more like how to live on your own or live in the environment, in the
Community
environment.
type,
Yeah.
community, daily living type things.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So do you have a staff member that is from your English language development program that serves those?
No. So we need ideas of how you do that, of how it's being done with in other districts. We'd love some ideas about how to do that well.
Okay. We'll see. One of the things that I can do is reach out and see if we can find some exemplars for you to look at of how they're doing that. I mean, I know what I've heard some do. I don't know the specifics about all their programs, but they have somebody assigned to make sure that those students receive the English language development services that they need, and that do educators have the ELL endorsement, things like that. Are you making sure that those things are addressed on their IEP? There is a box on the front of the IEP that's for special factors, and one of those is our language services needed, and are they addressed? And so that's one of the things that, you know, we look for, like on the IEP, and if they have language needs, then we'll look in the IEP of how they're addressed. And so when we come out on monitoring visits and stuff, and we would ask teams, so how are these addressed? And do you have like somebody, do they get English language development services? And if so, we're not seeing them here. Are they somewhere else within their curriculum that they're receiving? Or do you have teachers that are endorsed and know how to make sure that the content can help bridge the language gap? So those are some of the things to consider, but I know some LEAs have people that are assigned to those special programs for those students to make sure that they can help the teachers in those programs deliver the services that are needed.
So Kim,
Yeah.
can you follow up with can you follow up with Rhonda?
I can.
Okay, great. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Rhonda.
Thank
Well,
you, Kim.
thank you. Thanks everyone for letting me join you today. And I will get Christelle this information. I will also put my contact information at the bottom of that slide as well. I think it's at the top, but I'll put it at the bottom too. So you have all the contact information, and please reach out if you have questions. As Christelle said, we would really rather you call us and ask us the question than inadvertently implement something in your LEA that is not in line with the special education rules, the Code of Federal Regulations, Title III. You know, these are areas where teams sometimes they think, well, this is best, but it doesn't match with the law and doesn't match with the research, and it's not really equitable for students with learning another language. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kim. Kim is my treasured, valued colleague, like all of you. She's amazing.
Thank you.
So before we go to Chris Westerfield and the team at Murray, I'm just going to ask Michelle Loveday, if she's here, if she can.
Yes,
There she
I'm
is.
here. Yep.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking time.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I'm hoping you can actually, well, one thing, so I'm just going to say one thing about my Jordan visit. You know, I had like a total blast. I was like so energetic, you know, for an entire week of visiting schools, talking to administrators, working with Michelle and her team. You know, it was just like I was a glory hound. I mean, was so excited by talking with counselors, you know, and assistant principals and doing observations, and the students. The students were incredible. This one student that I stopped because I love the cross he was wearing. In his pocket, he had a rosary, and he took it out and he said, "Oh, I have a rosary in my pocket. Can I actually give it to you?" I mean, these are high school students, boys that, you know, are just so like really warm and lovely and just so fabulous. So, and the work that Jordan is doing with family engagement, their family fair, you know, it's just really if you could see the things that are happening in, you know, LEAs, charter schools, districts throughout the state, you would be just so proud and so excited about the work that's happening. So, Michelle, you can say anything about your experience
Yeah.
in the monitoring process. She actually has a flyer that I'll send to you that you can
Oh,
adapt.
yeah.
But Michelle, it's your time. You can share whatever you'd like.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Christelle, you could tell colleagues that Christelle loves the students. And it is great because seeing her in action, I mean, the teachers are an access and a part that she loves, but in the hallway, she stops and talked to a young man and had him pull up his pants and reaches out. And it was just so funny because we're walking along to go to the classroom and I turn around, I'm like, where did she go? And she's found another student to talk to. And then I like see him pulling up his pants and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like the auntie as she walks into the building, but the kids are respectful and I love the students as well. So it was just nice. I think it also alleviated the stress that the schools feel when they hear that we're doing this big, you know, state Title III monitoring. And the one thing that I valued was the fact that my team was able to go on this journey together. It's not how, as Christelle, she was saying that she was learning as she was doing this, and it used to be a whole bunch of people from different districts and the people from the state coming in, and now it's our team doing the observations and marking on a very useful observation tool that I found that we're going to keep using as we go out and work with schools. But to go back, when we got the email that we're going to be being monitored, I was kind of like, okay, how am I going to pick the schools? I wanted to go out to every school and have every school be observed, but Christelle's like, we're just doing 3. And based off of numbers, I had given her 5 schools to look at. I said, well, these are the schools that our teacher specialists have identified. And then based off of data, we ended up really being in a pocket of a feeder system in West Jordan. We tried to do Harriman High and Aspen Elementary, but based off of numbers, the goal of this Title III visit, when it's your turn, is that any classroom that we walk in will have a guaranteed ML. And so our West Jordan schools were it, which has been a nice flow because it's an elementary, a middle school, and a high school. As these students matriculate into the buildings, we can work on that vertical alignment. And so what I did to prepare, of course, I reached out and talked to the assistant superintendent and let them know we were going to be going into schools. I reached out to the administrator of schools, and it's a very simple on Canva flyer of this is what Title III monitoring is. This is where you can find it on the USBE website. This is the tool that we'll be using to go into the classroom. These are the dates we're coming out to your school. And 2-3 weeks prior, I just went out and verbally met with the principal so that he was aware, so he could tell his staff. I was like, we could walk into any classroom. This is not a dog and pony show. We just want you to do your regular teaching, so that he could see the personal feel, like we're coming in, this is the date, we're going to be there most of the day. We were there maybe 8 to 1 at one school, 8 to 2 at another school with a lunch break, so that the principals were there. And what was nice was the administrative of schools came to that meeting as well. So the leveling of people in the district knowing about the school visits made me feel better, because our district has changed a lot. And Jordan District, where West Jordan was typically where a lot of our MLs are and still are, we have grown out and expanded out. And so schools are now starting to see the value of really putting in content work for our ML students and families, but they also are feeling like they don't have enough resources and how to do it. And so this observation tool is kind of a good one. And so preparing my team, we talked a lot about what it would look like and how to use the tool and how to be objective. And as Christelle and I were talking more, I think moving forward, it's also just a really big reminder that, we've always known this, but we're not disciplinary in any sense of the nature. We're there to support and provide resources. So when we go in, we want to look at what's working and how to improve those areas that we partner with other departments, our teaching and learning department, our special ed department. And so I think my team learned a lot when it came into going in, because you go into the mindset, a lot of them were instructional coaches. I was a principal. And so you go in and you automatically start to look at like, what's wrong, the configuration of the classroom, and you start to automatically, and so you have to get out of your head of, this is not a teacher issue, this is how we support our MLs. And so you could see the growth on my observations from when I started out at one school to the last school, because I'd be like, oh, a student was getting disciplined and da-da-da-da. And I'm like, no, that's not the focus. So you have to redirect that. And so I suggested to Christelle, I'm like, a practice run would be good, even if through a video of using the tool before you go out and implement it with your team. I would highly recommend you do a practice run so that Christelle can kind of help you walk through, okay, you went down this way, this is the way we want to go, so that we can better utilize how to equip teachers with the monitoring visit. So I really valued Christelle's expertise and her insight and the way she modeled. After the monitoring visits, we sat down with administrators of what we initially, found and were excited about, and then the report will come out later, and I'll sit with schools and teams. But then even just reflecting with my team at the end of the week, they were excited to see the potential of teachers and the interaction with MLs. The students are well loved. That's not a question. And they're very respectful. They help me find, like, one school is a maze because it used to be like an open classroom, and they're always willing to go help us find the class and very respectful. And so that makes me feel happy that our students are in safe environments with teachers that want to do the best for them. And they're hungry for the knowledge. Of course, like every teacher around the state, they want a curriculum to spell it out for them. And there is no, it's like tier one instruction. And so we have to get them to use, what does tier one instruction look like for our MLs and accommodations with their WIDA. So that was the monitoring visit. We're going to use the form and invite ourselves out to other schools here in the future and use that because I think it will help guide a lot of instruction. And we're going to work with teaching and learning first and show them how to use the monitoring tool so they can go out when they go to math and science and social studies to use that. So that was the Title III monitoring. Christelle, I did give you a slide deck. I knew I wasn't going to be by my computer when we got to my part, and I don't know if you can share that slide deck really fast, and then it's yours. It's just a bunch of flyers of what we're doing in Jordan to enhance family engagement. Like I've said before, Jordan School District went from 1,300 MLs district-wide in 2019 to triple that. We're now at 5,000 in a very quick time. And so you can imagine the shift that teachers are having. You know, teachers that were good, teachers of the year, are questioning if they're good enough, because it's a shift when you have language learners in your classroom, and it causes teachers to feel frustrated and schools to have cultural shifts. And so our department has worked really hard to help our schools district-wide, our 70 schools, to navigate the shift. And so by doing that, we've modeled a few things. Our Fall Family Fair has always been in place. It was a small level, but now it's the expected Fall Family Fair kickoff at the beginning of the school district. So I have that flyer, Christelle, if you want to show that. Excuse me.
I'll actually send everything out.
Okay.
You know, because I also have your, you know, your flyer with the explanation of the Title III visit. So anything you want to
Okay.
send me, you know, I will send out to people because.
Okay. And I sent that in an email, like on a slide deck, so they can just click there. And so with our Fall Family Fair, it happens at the beginning of September, and one of my teacher specialists is the chair, and she's organized it in a way to where anyone can come, but it's focused on our ML families to come and get resources from Jordan School District. And every department that we have in our district that can be there is there. So we have 70 tables set up from digital learning to Canvas to even community tables for the Boys and Girls Club, Girl Scouts of America. So everyone's, and it's expected, it's on everybody's calendar by department, which I think has been very helpful because we've prided ourselves in pretty much being on everybody's agenda for our MLs because everyone's a language teacher. And so we've kicked that Fall Family Fair off. We even have the Superintendents of Rock. Some of you have superintendents or principals that play in that band, but our superintendent is in that band. So that's the entertainment. And then we have student performers. So that's how we draw the audiences, our multicultural clubs, dance and whatnot. And because of that modeling over the years, schools have now taken to have their own mini version of family nights and have invited our team to come out to those family nights to talk specifically to ML parents. And in this slide deck that I'll share with you, it's just 6 slides, and we have translators there. And we have like 15 minutes where we talk about what is the WIDA test, as you heard earlier in the meeting, the importance of it, communicating that with parents so that they can understand why students take it, what to expect from it, how it goes when they're registering. And then of course we end with the seal of biliteracy and the importance of the success of their students learning English. They can have this seal of biliteracy. And so we really highlight and celebrate that because of course our Spanish and our German and all these other classes are getting the seal of biliteracy, but our ML students were not. And so we're like, they're learning a language. So us advocating for that for the past 2 years, our seal of biliteracy numbers for our MLs have gone up. And to celebrate that, we had parent orientations for a while. I think Monty from Salt Lake came and saw that last year. And, it's during the day. And so you just try, and feel like, okay, the numbers were low, people weren't attending. We would have 2 or 3 parents and it wasn't helping. But so then last year we started the ML family nights by the feeder system. And we celebrate those students that have passed and graduated, so to speak, from the WIDA. And then we offer food. And that's been our biggest bang for the buck. Families have come and it's been so meaningful because a lot of these students don't get recognized at the end of the year celebrations. And so they get a medal, they get a certificate, they're called on stage with their name, and they're celebrated for, you know, becoming proficient in the English language. And then of course we pull in that, don't forget the seal of biliteracy, you can take that test. And it's a big night. Families dress up for it, and we have interpreters that are there for all languages. And it's just beautiful to see our students. Of course, our second language is Spanish, but we've met students from Romania, and our Ukrainian students are there, and students that speak Arabic. And so the celebration is one that last year we found out a few students weren't able to go or weren't able to be there. And then principals called us and said, we're going to do an assembly for our WIDA graduates. Can you come? So I think just the modeling at the district level that we want to celebrate and make this a big to do has been big. And then the last piece that we're teaching our schools is the simplest piece that we know, but one that they kind of leave out, which is getting to know your students and the importance of talking to each ML student and talking to them about why they're about to take the WIDA test in January. It's schools do it for the most part. They have these assessment parties and you're about to take the rise and but they don't take a moment to talk about WIDA. And so my 2 teacher specialists, Chelsea, her school was Aspen Elementary, and she wanted to do a project. And so she brought Krista along, and I'll have this sent out as well. And they went around to the 4th through 6th graders and just ask students questions. Where are you from? What are you excited about being here? How do you learn best? All those tools that WIDA has supplied us on their website, they put together in a form and just checked off talking to the students. And, you know, how do you best learn English? What do you want? And students said, as we gave out the results to teachers, that they don't want everything translated. That's not what they want. They just want it to maybe be explained a little bit more. One student even hugged the teacher specialist for taking the time to talk to her. Simple things. And then when that school took their WIDA test, it's no surprise that their scores were out the box higher because the students understood the value of the WIDA test. Even if they, in 6th grade, he's like, yeah, I've taken it 3 times. But they're like, but why do you think you keep failing it? Well, I'm just checking off, and so just talking about, well, it's important to show your proficiency and then you can get into honors classes. And so just taking that 10, 15 minutes to talk with those students, their assessment changed with WIDA last year. And so we're teaching our ELD leads how to do the interview. We're going to share that hopefully next year at the WIDA conference. And of course, our team would love to interview all the students at every school, but capacity is not the case. So we want to encourage teachers to do it. And so we have our next meeting coming up in a week with our ELD leads to encourage them to do that at their schools. And so those are just some pieces that we're pulling together so that our students can be successful on the WIDA test and they understand the importance of it. And then we've encouraged schools that if parents want to opt out of the test, that they talk to us first. We are finding that some of them, Christelle, you kind of were questioning why at the beginning where they just put in MLs when they were enrolled and registered. We're finding some families did get placed as MLs and the student is not. And so that is a question of like our registrars, trying to overly help by, their bias of because of a last name. And then they put students in that have never spoken another language. Or a lot of parents don't understand why they're assigned the ML status and they're afraid of it. That it'll identify them in other areas. And so we have to reassure the families, no, this is why they're MLs. You have those 4 questions, you answered 1 with another language, and this is what will happen. And then a lot of parents end up saying, oh, okay, well, we'll stay in, we understand it. So I think it's just, we spend a lot of time talking to schools and families, and it's been fun, and we're still learning and growing as a district. This observation tool is very helpful for us. It was a good journey for my team to realize how they needed to coach better and what we could do to improve. So that's enough talking from me. Christelle, thank you for sharing those slides, and thank you all for enduring my little moment. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them, or you know how to reach me in Jordan District.
Yeah,
Hey,
so Dave,
Michelle. Yeah, Michelle, can I just add something? This is just a
Yes,
credit.
of course.
This is just a credit to how little things build into big things, right? The work that you did here in Granite years ago with family has now led to we don't do the family nights anymore. I mean, but these little steps like that you put in place here to help with that family night that was initially generated from the district has now turned into, over the last couple years, they don't need our help anymore. We have family nights in every single uh, high school feeder system, and they do it on their own, right? But that was work that was built years ago. We just built on that and kept it going. But those are
Thank you.
the
That means a
really
lot.
no, those are the really great things that you got to know. Those little steps have now gone into, and a couple of years ago they came to Ed Equity and said, "Hey, you guys need to help us with these family things." And we said, "No, we don't. You guys know how to do it. Do it." And because of the work that you guys did before, they are. And so just keep plugging along and know that
That's the goal.
those little steps that you're doing now are going to turn into something big. And I'm just amazed at how these people how now really realize they can do it. They know how to do
Yeah.
it.
Thank you. And I'm starting to see that because, and I appreciate seeing, sometimes you don't get to see the fruits of your labor as you're
Wow.
starting off. And then as I saw the numbers from Granite going into Jordan and I was moving into Jordan, I thought that was helpful. But I'm starting to see that now where schools are now reaching out and saying, oh, we're having a family night on Saturday.
Yeah.
So now we can start to back off so that we can have our capacity to operate. So thank you, Dave. It's awesome. And I'm glad that you're there to see it and
Keep
keep it
going,
going.
Michelle. It's gonna turn
Keep
out. I was
going.
also gonna add to folks. I'm gonna be putting together a just a quick presentation. We have in November, and I'll invite some of you folks to come to one of our junior highs, a couple of our junior highs to see. But through Flashlight, we've created a cultural pathway, and it allows kids to talk about who they are. They will be given a picture of their family. Language is a piece, their journey, their beliefs, and they get the opportunity through Flashlight 360 to talk about who they are. We call it the cultural pathway. And so if you guys are interested, be looking for an email from myself. But I think it's going to be a cool way for kids to not only help their language, their productive language, but also tell a little bit about who they are and these pieces of culture that we know work. And so I think that, and you mentioned it, Michelle, it's getting to know the kids, right? And you're having people do that in Jordan. And so just keep plugging along. It does work out.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
thanks, Dave and Michelle. I'll just add one thing before we go to Murray and Chris and her team about newcomers and the work that they're doing. And also when I send out the recording, there'll actually be Robin's presentation on the panel and Michelle and Ellie's that we did for the governor's newcomer, New Americans Task Force for Economic Opportunity. So the whole point of, and this is the reason it's a challenge, is that if you're an instructional coach, but somehow you think you know the answer for every single teacher without understanding what's actually going on, then giving advice does not help anybody at all. So the whole goal of appreciative inquiry is that you identify, based on research and the observation tool, what is the most promising practice that you can commend a teacher for, so that she won't feel or he won't feel incompetent, and that you can build the capacity for collective efficacy, as Hattie suggests, is the most, significant increase when you create that in a school. So the biggest issue ends up being, that Michelle and I have talked about and other people, how do you build local capacity to provide the kind of support that teachers can actually see, based on the research, what they're doing is a promising practice and the impact it's having on the students' abilities to actually do more cognitively rigorous work that's well scaffolded. So that's kind of the point. And remember, I'm going to send out all the slides. So you shouldn't have to really worry about, opening anything in the chat. So Chris, are you ready just to give us a rundown on the work that Murray's been doing?
I am. Thank you so much for giving me a few minutes to share this information with all of you. I'm kind of taking Robin's place today. I know she usually gives this information and she's probably a lot more eloquent than me, so bear with me here. But I was just asked to talk about the environment, creating a welcome environment for our families and kids here in Murray District, and what we're doing to ensure that all of our families and kiddos feel welcome and safe and like they're in a great place. So we all know that the students and families come to us with a wide range of skills and knowledge, and some arrive having a background of schooling to draw from, while we've got others who arrive feeling super anxious with little to no background in education. And so one of the most important things for me and my team is to ensure that we understand where they are on that path. Are they coming to us with very little education, knowledge of schooling, or do they have some background information to draw from, and they're going to be a lot more comfortable in this space fairly quickly? And the biggest way that we do that is I've asked all of our registrars, our secretaries, the schools that our families show up at to reach out to my team right away if they've got a family that speaks a second language and needs some interpretation support. I've got languages on my team where we can get liaisons out there to help with that registration process right away, if possible. I like to have somebody there to help represent that family. Our secretaries, our registrars, our counselors, they get really busy and they don't always have that time to sit with the family and explain a lot of what's going on in the language they understand. And so for me, it's really that personal piece, and then also getting to connect with the students right up front, right? And to say, hey, here are all these familiar faces in the school setting that if at any point during the day you start to feel like, oh my gosh, I need to step back, I'm overwhelmed, I'm really frustrated, here's a familiar face you're going to already know and can ask for help, and we can take a minute and chat with you and kind of reset and go back. But with our refugee agencies, we get contacted by them already up front. So I'm already prepared ahead of time when we've got refugee families showing up. I've got a team member there, but it's our immigrant families coming in who show up. And I've gone to some of our schools, and all of our schools are amazing. Front office staff is amazing, but at any given time, they can have 10 different families in there and students. And so I've seen a lot of our families that need to register, are new to the US, have no idea how to be in a US school setting or even what a registration process looks like, set off to the side and had a computer put in front of them and said, here you go, get your kiddos registered. And hours can go by while they're trying to figure this out, with converting the screen to the language. It pops up in English and then they click on this button and then it'll come up in the language they understand, but still that's such a process. So again, going back to, for me, if there is any way possible that myself or a team member can be there with a family who speaks, whose language is their first language is other than English, and we can help them through that whole registration process, that is my preference. If not, I've asked our secretaries to follow up with me and say, hey, we just had this family register. They speak Swahili, they speak Somali, they speak Spanish, whatever language it is. And then I have a team member follow up with them. What can we talk to you about during your registration? What didn't you understand? What do you need help with? We noticed these forms didn't get filled out when you completed your registration. Can we help you do that? What other needs do you have? Which is a really big one, because not only do we need to know what they need to or help them understand about being in a US school, a lot of our families have come to us and they've got nothing. They are here with very, very little. And so that follow-up piece for me also is, what else do you need? What can we help you with? And then connecting them to those resources, right? Whether it's our counselors, whether it's food banks, whether it's like a DWS to find employment, whatever those resources are, getting that information to them to get that help and get them up and running now here in our country. So those are kind of the big things. The other thing that I ensure my team does is I've created these guidebooks, secondary and elementary, and they're very visual. So it's something like, does your student ride the bus? And it's got a picture of the bus, or do they walk? And then I've got a picture of some students crossing a crosswalk. And in that picture, we circle which one it is. They're walking, they're taking the bus. So that after we've explained all of this to the family in the language they understand, these parents are going to go home having been told a bunch of things. And they're just not, I wouldn't remember. So the expectation is they can flip through this guidebook that's only like 10 pages, very visual, and they can say, oh, okay, they circled the bus. My student is riding the bus, and below it is written the number. But we've always got that follow up. If you don't remember, here's our information. Please follow up with us. We're happy to talk you through this again. The other thing that's important is, all of the rules and regulations and stuff that these families are inundated with, that all of our families are inundated with when they arrive and register, is just really overwhelming. And so I have my team do it in kind of a weekly breakdown. Let's take on school policies. Let's take on dress code. So we set up meetings over weeks and months where we just kind of tackle little pieces until our families tell us, yeah, we understand now. We understand why this is okay or why this is not okay. And they feel comfortable asking for help on any other questions. And then also with all of the programs and everything that school districts have now, all the different, we send our Chromebooks home with their students. And a lot of these families, our families and students have never been on a Chromebook, have never been on a computer. So helping them understand how to log on and do all of that has gone a really long way in creating an environment where our parents and students reach out to us regularly. My team talks to our families and students probably 10 to 15 families a day, every day, all week long, connecting over just the littlest questions to really big, overwhelming questions that some of our families have. And I know Michelle referred to this earlier also in Jordan District, but their numbers have grown significantly. And Jordan's a big district. Murray's not quite as big, but the same. Our numbers have tripled from 3 years ago. And the most important thing to me is that even though our numbers are growing, I don't want anybody slipping through the cracks, whether you're just figuring out school in the US or you've got a lot to draw from coming from your previous country. I want to make sure everybody's helped and gets to a place where they no longer need my team to be supporting them or all the different things, that they're really comfortable in the classroom and really comfortable calling principals, front office, and handling things that way and feel set up for success for their future. Let's see, what else did you need me to talk about, Christelle? I apologize if I haven't hit on everything.
No, I think you've actually done something that's really important, which is already building on what Michelle has said. The other thing is, you're talking about levels of support for different families that come from different situations. So the levels of support is really important in relationship to creating conditions for them to ask specific questions related to what they need, because it could be very, very different than someone, you know, who's been in a refugee camp. An example is when counselors, and this is on the USBE website, we have a link that shows all the courses that could be taken in every single country. And instead of counselors saying things like, and I know this doesn't happen in most of the schools, but things like, you know, well, and, you know, oftentimes when, especially Ukrainian and Afghan families, they come, they're not going to bring transcripts with them, for heaven's sakes. They're just trying to escape with their lives. And so the
Right.
question is, how do you create those conditions for relationships so that you can better understand the academic background of a child, you know, who oftentimes when they come to us, you know, I met an asylee from Guatemala and I had lunch with her last week. And she got a scholarship, 4-year scholarship at the Eccles Business School, the First Ascent Scholars, because she had a really strong academic background. But somehow we make these assumptions that if they're not fluent in English, they don't know academic content, which is a
Mm.
huge mistake. So, Chris, thank you for giving us an overview. I really appreciate it. And the work you've done in Murray, I've seen some really excellent instruction in Murray the last time I visited. So anytime you want me to pop in, you just give me a call.
We love to have you here, Christelle. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Now we're going to go to Veronica, and Veronica, there's actually something that Stephanie has put in from Tooele about families and registration and, you know, support liaisons in the schools and counseling appointments. And so, you know, we have these rich, rich resources throughout the district, throughout the state, of people doing like extraordinary work. And the reason we do that is that our focus in Title III is looking at assets. What is really working well so that it can be disseminated and upscaled so that we can all benefit as the state. I mean, that's our philosophy in Title III. You know, that's why, you know, my experience of visiting schools is such a great experience, because when you see these amazing administrators, their relationships with the students and the families, that's what we want to share. I mean, that's the whole point of, you know, how advocacy looks. And we have examples of that already in Utah. So Veronica, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience in the interpreter course and then what you're going to do? And this is a really great example in relationship to the things that Provo is also doing. So Veronica.
Yes. Hi, Christelle. I just want to thank everybody that has been talking, because every time you held one of these meetings, I learned so much. And I can't wait to get all those presentations from Kim and Michelle, the great stuff that you guys have talked about. I look forward to looking into and reading into. You're gonna have to forgive me. The school that I was at was very generous to give me an office, and you'll hear bells going off and you'll probably hear kids in the background. So I will try my very best to do this fairly quickly, because I think the bells are moving next in a couple of minutes. Yes, so I took the interpreter level course 1 from Christelle, and I learned so much. In our district, we have a great need to be able to help our families in a language that they can fully understand, as I know many of you have the great need for as well. But we are still growing, we are still learning, and so knowing that we still had that need to have that personal connection to close that gap between our communities and our schools, we decided to move forward in building capacity in our own and growing our own. And so being that we have HB 302, we decided to go ahead and use Christelle's Canvas online course and make a few adjustments here and there because we have to meet and cater to our families. And we're going to start in a few weeks our very own interpreter course. And again, I use a lot of the basics and fundamentals that Christelle had in her online course. And so just to give you an overview of what it's going to look like, it'll be a 10-week course. It'll be offered to anybody, but mostly we are targeting our ELD technicians because they are most of the time the ones that are being pulled out to interpret for our families. Now, again, we're still at the learning stage, and so we have so much to still do, but we are focusing in that interpretation services. But I know in the back of my mind that what a lot of the questions that I'm already going to be getting are, well, certain vocabulary that needs to be translated into Spanish, and so just with using the Microsoft software that Christelle sent out previously, that's just kind of how I'm going to go about it, to be able to meet the needs of our families that don't just speak Spanish but speak other languages as well. So I'm doing a 10-week course, and this will be at a self-paced. We are going to have weekly Zoom meetings, and within these meetings, what I'm going to add to is giving them an opportunity to interpret while I state something in English. And so that way, come to the end of the course, we're pushing. We were initially going to start at the end of October. We're going to push it just a few more weeks out, because at the end of the course, we want to be able to really make sure that what our interpreters are translating or interpreting is with full accuracy. And because one of our major focuses right now is not just meeting those needs of those families, but with instead are the IEP meetings. We just need to really come together and help our own personnel, so that in building that capacity, our families are fully aware of what is happening with their student and their education. And so we're going to try to assess this by interpreting and having them recorded. And I can't wait to see what the progress is. Something that I really took from Christelle's online course was just that community of the learning happening, and there's so much to be said about that, because I am doing it myself right here in these meetings. I'm learning from all of you, and there's just no other way to be able to do that but to create that within our own district, and then keeping my fingers crossed that everything goes great and I can do a follow-up presentation to see how that goes, Christelle.
Yeah, that sounds great. NEBO's come a really long way. Last year, we did a monitoring visit and just had a really great experience with Veronica and then other observers and their schools. So it was a very exciting experience for me. We're actually going to move to Provo, and Tani Brown and Tiffany Evans, and they're going to tell us the way in which they're upscaling the interpreter course in relationship to their own application, so that their own district can certify interpreters. So take it away, Provo.
Thank you. I'm Tawny Brown.
And I'm Tiffany Evans.
So we just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing. And I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly. Can you see this screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So in our district, we asked schools to kind of follow this timeline over the next 3 years for interpretation. So the biggest one is for those critical and legal meetings like IEPs, 504s, suspension, that kind of thing. We're asking that starting this year in all of those meetings, there's a certified interpreter or that they use an approved interpretation service provider. So because of that, we created an interpretation course based on that course from Christelle. So I took that course over the summer with Christelle, and we used that to kind of design a Provo specific one. So it goes over HB 302 and those interpreter standards, and it's mostly on Canvas. The employees do it self-paced. We're finding it's taking them about 2 to 4 hours of the self-paced part. And then they come for a 1-hour in-person training at the end. So at that training, we review those standards, talk about how they're applying them in their contexts, let them ask questions. We have an assurances page that they sign, just saying that they will follow all of those standards. And then we do a final little assessment to talk through or to have them go through those standards one more time. So in that certification, we talked to them about not serving dual roles. So we've asked our interpreters if they're interpreting to only interpret and not, for example, be running an IEP meeting and interpreting for that meeting. So that's something we're dealing with in our district, is making sure that interpreters are just there to interpret. And then we're also working with our HR department to figure out how those interpreters are getting paid. We'll end up having a separate job description just for those critical meetings. And so classified employees would clock out and clock in for that new job description. And then so we're working with HR on how to get that happening. So this is just on the left is an example of the modules in our course. So they go through some information about HB 302, watch some of the videos from the course, and then go through each standard. And then we also give them some vocabulary words for IEP meetings and 504s and translate them into the languages. So most of our interpreters speak Spanish, but we also have some who speak Portuguese, French, and Italian. So we've translated all of that. We just did our second round of the in-person training. So we now have 20 certified interpreters in the district. So that's pretty exciting. We're moving through that. So then we also created a shorter training just for volunteers who are only interpreting at parent-teacher conferences. It's about a 15-minute video that goes through the standards, and then they take a little Google form quiz and just go through those standards and assure that they're willing to follow those standards. So that's what we're doing for interpreter certification. And then we also have some other things that we support from our department.
If there's an instance of, like, in the office where we can't have a certified interpreter there, we try to train our staff and our admin teams on different devices they could use during those legal meetings too. So we have like the time kettle devices that we've trained them on, Microsoft Translator, Google Translate. We try to do all of our documents in Canva because it does a really great job at just translating the whole PDF into any language that we need. And then we also use Language Line too. So we have weekly meetings with our instructional coaches and our Title I coordinators to go over these, to teach them how to support it. We also have a website for our department that walks them through little demos and how-to videos and how to how to work the devices in case they get stuck. So all of this is available to the schools as well.
So are there any questions?
What else?
Yeah, so I was going to make a couple of comments. The work that you've done is really incredible, considering that USBE just finished the first cohort. And this is, I mean, the point of this is really to learn from what Provo is doing in relationship to leveling the ability of the local community, the local school community, to use resources for translation services so that families are always engaged, right? I mean, these are really great examples of implementation of HB 302. Representative Dan Johnson actually, I had a conversation with him about a couple of months ago. And because he talked about his legislation and the impact on the way Utah is implementing it, the people in Colorado actually wanted to talk to me about the kind of implementation that we're doing so that they can use the legislation of Dan Johnson to make a difference for families in Colorado. So the work that Utah is doing, is really exemplary, and I don't, I'm kind of a hard nut and I don't really give compliments very easily unless the work that people are doing, is really excellent and can be disseminated and upscaled. I mean, that's what a learning community is. So Tiffany and Tani, thank you so much. I really appreciate the work you're doing in Provo as a great example.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I'm just going to add one more thing. There's some high school teachers who actually want to do an adjustment in the course just for parent-teacher conferences so that their seniors who are multilingual students can have that specific certification. So if you guys want to work on with me, with that kind of thing, do you realize what we could do with seniors in high school who actually, are fluent speakers in in Arabic and Urdu and all the languages that families need in Utah. So let's all get together and talk about how we can make that happen for I'm thinking juniors and seniors, and then we would think about the way in which we would design something specific for high school students to be certified for parent-teacher conferences, something like that.
Christelle, I love that idea, Christelle. It's basically we're cropping our own, right? And then
Right.
that could be a window into them realizing that I have a skill that others don't. And so now I can use that. In fact, just by you saying that, it gives me the idea of why don't I could look into our CTE world and see if they could also start to work on getting these kids internships,
Yeah.
into the court system or other systems where they use translators, interpreters, because that is just I'm in. So whenever you want to do that, let's get it going.
Okay, sounds great. And again, this goes back to creating a career pathway based on assets of students and families, instead of, other approaches that don't really build the economic. I mean, the argument ends up being from the governor's office, how do you leverage the economic future of Utah? Well, we're in a perfect position to do that when you think about globalization and world trade and the languages that we have here. These are all amazing assets. And the younger that we start, the better it is for everybody. So along that line, we're going to move to, and I just got a message. It says, could we access the parent-teacher conference training? Is that shareable? Okay, first of all, we have to develop it. As soon as Provo and maybe Ellie and Michelle and Dave and Esther and Anya and all the people here, we could actually use a model, send it out, and then it would be really specific for teacher conference training, which I think would be a good thing. So I know that all of you are in for this, and I'll send something out so we can start working on it.
Hey, Christelle, can I just ask Tani, where those, because the way you put the translation graph together is fantastic. I love it and would love to. Where do we find that on your webpage? Is it on your webpage somewhere? And in what department? Because I'm not.
Can you, Tani, can you send me the link and then I'll actually send it out to everybody?
I'll have Michelle send
Can you
that stuff.
What's the question that you had?
No, just wondering about where the graph that she has that she showed about translation and how you're working through the years to do that.
Oh, the timeline.
The
Yeah, I thought
timeline.
that was very well done.
Okay, yeah. We'll
And-
ask Michelle to send that along.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
and
good.
also, Tani, the whole thing about the resources, like you have a web page that says
Yeah,
translator resources, and all of that. And so,
that,
that's a good model for all of
it's
us.
fantastic. That's what I would love to see as well, too.
Okay.
Yep, we'll ask Michelle to send things on for you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Tani. Really appreciate it. So aren't you all excited? You realize we're doing work that, I don't know, this is just my experience internationally as well, that, you know, there's no other state that's doing the kind of work that we're doing. And frankly, the people that I know, in the UK and Germany and Spain, they're not doing it either. So, we have this great opportunity, um, to share. It's kind of the appreciative inquiry approach. The assets that we're using for diverse families and for creating, career opportunities for, a great group of students and their families. So with this, we're actually going to move to someone who is a very good friend of mine. I can hardly wait till she finishes her dissertation and we can start writing. So this is Ellie Gallagher, and she's going to talk a little bit about, you know, again, this is the opportunity gap in relationship to who has access to DLI programs in a way that make a significant difference for students to have post-secondary success. I don't know what I actually said, but I think that's the intention. Okay, Ellie.
Okay, so I have a couple short charts. I don't have a big long presentation to share with all of you, but just a couple short charts of some data that we've been digging through in Wasatch. And just to put it out there, it's a work in progress. So the data is it's not completely cleaned up. So I'm showing you kind of some rough data, but the preliminary data can't be denied. When we look at it, there's been a lot of questions about, is DLI the best place for a multilingual student or a newcomer? And of course, the research that we have over the past 30 years has, from Lingholm Leary, from Collier and Thomas, they've all reinforced this idea that like ML students do have better opportunities, more access to content, grade level material and curriculum, and they have a higher graduation rate. Research has shown all of this, but we don't have as much local data to back that up. Dr. Eric Campbell, the director of student services in my district, conducted his dissertation, and he examined EL students in DLI and EL students not in DLI in the Wasatch district. And his study also concluded, without even considering conditions, just looked at the two demographics, his study also concluded that dual language immersion was a better placement because it was a more effective program for supporting ML students in reaching high levels of bilingualism, biliteracy, and then academic achievement. So based on that study, we're continuing to evaluate our in-district data. And so Christelle shared with me, just to reiterate, I don't have a chart on it, but just to reiterate over here, you've got like 47% of students who are just ELs making adequate annual progress, whereas there's about 60% that are in DLI. And she already mentioned that today. Below, what we're looking at is a chart that has just the Wasatch Wasatch students. And these are students that have exited dual immersion between the grades, first grade, it's actually kinder and sixth grade, because we do have students who exit at the end of kinder. So kinder to sixth grade. And then of these students that exited, this is the ones that were in DLI, and these were the ones that were not. No, I'm sorry. Hold on. The blue is exited from DLI. and the orange is if they were not in DLI. To the right here, these are the total number of students who are MLs who are DLI and MLs who are not in DLI. We've had an increase in this number of not in DLI because of some issues that we're trying to solve. Number one, sometimes the language of the EL student is not the language of the DL program, and so they might not be in it. The other issue is we've had some program capacity issues that we're working through, but it can't be denied. When you look over here, students in dual immersion exit at a higher rate than students who are not in DLI. Then if you go up here, these are, let me look at this graph. This is just last year. So just the student receiving services to not receiving services. You can see that these are, and what did they do here? Okay, and so the blue are the number of students that were exited out of the total.
Hey, Ellie,
So
you know, your sound keeps going in and out. So
does
I
it?
think,
Oh, why
yeah, I
is it
think,
doing that?
I
All
don't
right,
know.
let me just.
I think you have to actually speak more clearly into the.
That's so weird because I'm like right here. Okay, it might be my headphones. Like,
You're gone
all right, I'll try
again.
to. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, it's the battery on my headphones. You guys can pause for 1 second. I can maybe come off of this audio.
Okay.
Uh,
And can you make it bigger? Can you make the visual bigger?
yeah. I don't see stop share, which is really a problem. Oh, there it is. I got it. Oh, hold on. Stop yelling at me.
Oh, we can't hear you again.
Let's change the audio to. Can you guys hear me? It should be my system.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, now I can't hear you at all. Oh, why did this do this right when I was. And now it's doing it. Is that bet? I can't hear you, Christelle.
Can you hear me now?
Ah,
Well, maybe we should
okay.
say,
There we go. Now can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes. I'm sorry, you guys. Of course it did that right when I was going to share something, not while everyone else was sharing. Okay, let's try again. All right, now make it bigger. Let's see if I can.
That's okay. You can just tell us yeah, that's fine.
That's better. Okay.
Yep.
So basically what I was saying here, I don't know how much you heard, but so over here you see the sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm so thrown off. Sorry, hold on. Let's just go to the numbers. So basically last year out of Wasatch, we had 267 students that were in DLI. We had 291 total that were monitored. Of those, 91 were DLI students who were exited, while only 31 were just regular EL students. And the percentage of that, we had 291 that were DLI and 267 that were not in a DLI program. So you can see that the numbers of students who are in DLI and not in DLI are pretty close, but 3 times as many students exited out of dual immersion than non-dual immersion. And so we know that dual immersion is a really great placement for these students based on this monitored and exited data. And then also we have the adequate annual progress as well. I just didn't have that for you today. And then last, And I know this isn't as important in some districts, but in our district, they tend to focus on RISE. So the other thing I wanted to show everybody, this is grades 3, 4, and 5. So 3 is in blue, 4 is in orange, and 5 is in green. And these are the total ELL students in this first column. See if I can make this bigger for you guys. So it's total ELL in this first column. And then these are total ELL and DLI. So you can see now we have more of our EL students in DLI than not in DLI. And then of the traditional, so these are the DLI right here. These are the traditional ELL. So we have more in DLI than we don't. But then look over here. These are students in grades 3, 4, and 5 that passed the RISE test that are EL students. They are in dual immersion and they passed. Opposed to, these are the ones that are traditional EL students that passed. To just give you guys a number on that, we had 10, 21, 35 that passed a RISE test, while only, oh, sorry, right here, passed a RISE test, whereas only 2. And the numbers are pretty fair when you look at statistics. So when you look at how many traditional we have, you can see that the percentage is much higher if they're in dual immersion. So basically, moral of the story here is we have local, sorry, okay. So we have state data and we have state research or national research. We have state research. We have local research out of Eric's dissertation. And now if you dig down into your own district, I'm sure you will find similar numbers. Now, of course, I only pulled students that were Spanish speakers in a Spanish dual immersion program when I was looking at this, okay? So I wasn't looking at the students that speak other languages with this last data set, okay? So one of the issues I think we're all facing is, how we ensure that our students have access to this program. And I would open it up, Christelle, if it's okay, to, what have some other districts have been doing, if per se you have a strand of dual immersion in a school, and then let's just say 8 newcomers show up, and there's already 35 and 35 in your dual class. What are some things that other districts are considering or doing? Because the issue we have here is if you place a student when they arrive, it's a newcomer, in a traditional class, the data and the research, the evidence and the research is showing us that that's not the best placement for them. So I'm just curious about how across the state, anyone is addressing this or what thoughts everybody has.
Yeah, Ellie, I think that we can actually, when I send out everything, I can actually make this case and then ask people to share what they're actually doing. And that'll give us kind of a broader perspective because we have 20 people on right now, and usually, it's much more. But I think the case that we're making goes back to this idea is how our parents and families engage in the educational process of their children so that they actually know that their heritage language is valued and that the students have an opportunity to become literate in that language and therefore become more proficient in English. I mean, I don't know how many times we have to say this. I mean, this is about 30 or 40 years worth of research. So this is the piece that I think is really important. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone for attending, for all the people who shared the amazing work that they're doing in their schools, in their districts. and the way in which we can support each other to make a difference for, the students who depend on us to be their advocates. So I'm going to sign off, but I'm going to stay on. So I'm going to end the meeting. But anyone who has a personal question for me, I'm available to stay on for any kind of other questions.
Hey,
Again,
Christelle, I don't have a question, but to Ellie's response or question about what is everybody doing, with DLI? Ellie, you know what has frustrated me over the last 20 years is that we can't be flexible in schools. It's annoying. It's irritating. We put too many rules and stupid ideas into schools that almost force schools not to do what's best for the kid. Honestly, I'm just being honest here. And so, as you've been in schools all the time, and as a former principal in a dual language program, well, why can't we look at options where these kids maybe aren't in the classroom, right? But at certain times of teaching, that they get the opportunity to slip into one of those DLI classrooms and get instruction in their native language and then go back into their homeroom. I mean, it's just these simple ideas like this that we could be talking about, but people freak out so much about, oh, well, that's not in the rules, that's not in the state guidelines, that's not in the district guidelines. How about it's really good for a kid guideline? Where does that come into play? And that irritates me, Ellie, but I hear you because in the last 2 months, we've had 426 refugee and newcomers come into our district. All right. We're running into the same problems you're running into, even if it might be at a smaller scale. It's still the same problem. And I think it's just that flexibility. I don't have an answer for you, but geez, can't we be smart enough to sit here and work within our schools that have this fantastic ability, dual language? But I always hear, oh no, we can't do that. It's not in the regulation. Oh, you can't, no, and you can't do this and you can't do that. It's irritating, but I hear you.
Yeah, I think the issue about working in a bureaucracy has challenged me pretty much all my life. But also I don't let that stop me, or the advocacy that we're all saying right here, which is, how do we know what's really working for students? Well, if you don't really ask the students their experiences, or you don't really ask the families, and you're not open to, people talk about assessment. The purpose of an assessment is to actually adjust what you're doing based on the feedback you're receiving for those that you are serving. I mean, that's kind of a really simple way to talk about the way in which we use feedback to adjust what we're doing based on if it's working or not. If it's not working for, a range of students, then we have to rethink what we're actually doing. One of the things that I've worked on that I want to send out to you once the recording is done and sent to me is I have a new ebook study for all the resources for the newcomer toolkit that's available in Midas. And then I'm finishing up the EL toolkit with all the resources that are there. So you'll be able to actually use that in your professional development. You don't have to pay for it. You can copy it in your own Canvas platform. You can use it for the kind of professional learning that is the kind of professional learning that we're talking about. It's the way in which you adjust practices based on, and this is appreciative inquiry and promising practices, not a silver bullet, but how is it that you're adjusting what you're doing, your policies and practices for the context that you work in, and the students and families that you're serving. So I'll stop there and I'll just stay on if anyone has a question. it's
Well,
great to see.
Christelle, we were also looking at ideas of having a teacher, a dual language Spanish teacher, I don't know why we're not doing this in this day and age, record her lessons while she's teaching, say a math lesson, right? Ellie in Spanish, and then they record that section, and then the newcomers are then able to access it on their computers within their home rooms. I mean, there's all these ideas I think we could do to help these kids. But it's a matter of I just feel like teachers, and rightfully so, feel overwhelmed, right? And that's the biggest piece. But all these ideas I think are doable for kids and can be done. But anyway, I'm gonna stop talking. Thanks for letting me spew.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, Dave. We'll have to have a private conversation about how we can upscale the work that's being done that really benefits students, and all of you are welcome.
See
So
you,
thanks.
Christelle. Thank you.
You're welcome, Dave. Thanks to everybody else. Esther, Lindsay, Monty, good to see you. Erica, Ruth Ann, Dinah, and the Washington crew. Melinda, nice to see you. Missy, welcome. Make sure you stay in touch. Ruth Ann from Uinta, give my love to Jaime. Connie, take care. Talk to you soon about our actual monitoring visit. Don't worry about it, it'll be fun. Take care of yourselves, all of you, and I'll just stay on for any other questions that you have.
Thanks, Christelle. Sorry about that sound issue.
Well, that's all right. Things
Just
happen.
it threw me off because then I was like, just lost my thought. But all right, I will talk to you soon. Thank
Okay.
you. All
Take
right.
care. Bye-bye.
Christelle, I had a quick question, and I don't know how I missed this. Is Anne Michelle gone?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, so who is it? Do I just email Megan Lopez about questions about WIDA testing or?
Yeah, Megan is the main person who does that, but if it's related especially to special needs or alternate assessment,
Oh, Tracy.
so it's actually Tracy. So
Tracy.
Megan, you would send it to her, and then if it's relevant to our student population that's neurodiverse, then she would connect you to Tracy Gooley.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right, thanks for the update. I just didn't quit. I got a return email, and so I thought, oh, I better check in. Okay, thank you.
That's okay, Melinda. Take care.
Have a great weekend.
You too, sweetheart.
Hi, Christelle. This is Missy Conover. I came from the Title I world for many years, and then I was put into this position in the middle of last year. So I feel like I'm trying to tread water without direction. In Title I, they have a new Title I director meeting. Is there something like that with this program, or do you have an
Yeah,
ELL for dummies?
no, don't say that. I mean, we're all learning together, so don't, don't focus on the things that you don't know. Most of us don't know much anyway. It's just because of our experience. So which LEA are you from? Which district or LEA?
Promontory School.
Promontory, okay. So usually the new directors meeting for ALS always happens in August. I'm actually thinking of doing a series of webinars and putting it in the Title III Professional Learning Catalog. That's just about, things that you need to know that most people who have been here for a while understand. So that will be, and the other thing is, if you go to the Title III webpage and you review everything there, it'll help you understand what an individual learning plan can be, the models for language services programs, the legislation, all of those things. So, if you haven't done that yet, make sure you go there and then you look at the professional learning tab and see what's available as well. And then you can just email me. At the bottom of my signature is a time to meet. And I have available times where we can just do a one-on-one session with you so you don't feel, at sea all the time, because it is quite a bit. It's a lot. But I don't want you to be overwhelmed and worried.
Yeah, I've gone to the website and I've done a lot of reading. I just feel like there's just so much. And those resources that you were just talking about would be amazing.
Yeah, and I think
Is-
that's the issue when you come into when you come into a new position. So, and also you can always email me if there are like really specific questions, or if you want to meet
Okay.
one-on-one. I'm always available to you and to anyone else who needs help.
Okay. Is the August meeting recorded? Is there a way to get to that?
Yeah, if you actually, after I get, so just email me and say, please share the link. All the playlists, like all the recordings, are actually